Now it's time to bring in our first guest, a repeat guest here for the Income Generation, and one of the nicest people that I've had the pleasure of interviewing, as I stated back in May, right to his face, and that is Dr. Ben Carson, now former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Before he was Secretary, Dr. Carson spent nearly 30 years as Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Children's Center. Dr. Carson, thanks so much for being back with us here on the Income Generation.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you again. Thank you.
So a lot has changed since May. Your appointment is now ended. How do you think President Biden's handling of the coronavirus crisis will be different from President Trump's, and what does it mean for our country?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that we were able to get a vaccine. It makes all the difference in the world because, it's called the novel coronavirus because it's new and it doesn't act like anything that we've ever seen before. And one of the things that's vitally important is that we build on what each other knows. Rather than get into our respective corners and point fingers and say, well, you should have done it this way. Let's just learn as we go and build on that so that we can get the people a cure.
Sure. So how long do you think it'll take before we get to that goal of herd immunity between those who have had the virus already and recovered, those who get vaccinated? What's your best guess in terms of time frame?
Well, I suspect probably late summer, early fall. It's going to be a combination of people who've had it already and people who get the vaccine. I've had it already. I almost died from it. But in a way, it's very relieving because I can't give it to anybody and nobody can give it to me. So that's good. And that's the way we hope the whole population will be by that time.
Sure. And it's only relieving, of course, because you didn't die from it, right? So now hindsight makes it a relief. But I'm sure you had some scary moments when you went through it. I've talked to people all the time that have gone through it. So God bless you. You made it through the other end.
Thank you.
What could go wrong with the vaccine? These other strains that maybe the vaccine becomes less effective with. What could go wrong to push this end of the summer timetable back?
Well, obviously there could be logistical problems that impact our ability to give the vaccine. But, obviously the big worry is that we get a new strain that is not amenable to vaccinations that we're giving. That would be a real disaster. Or, maybe where this one came from, maybe there's another one being worked on to release. I don't know. But we should entertain all possibilities and be ready for every eventuality. And as these new strains are coming up and we say, well, the vaccine still covers them, let's also be looking at other alterations in the vaccine that we might be able to make so that we are ready when other things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you're not totally ruling out the theory that the virus was created in a laboratory somewhere, as many are not ruling that out either. So, how about the state issue? We have people from New York that are coming down to Florida to try to get vaccinated because it's easier to get vaccinated here. There's more red tape in other states. Initially, I know you were a fan. I know you don't want to get political, but initially you were a fan of saying, hey, let's let each state make their own decisions. But now that we have a vaccine, is that the right avenue now in terms of vaccinating people, or maybe the federal government needs to take a more proactive role if they legally can?
No, I think actually federalism is the way to go here. Let the states and localities do it. And take one layer of bureaucracy out will increase the efficiency quite significantly. And we've got 50 states, which means we have 50 laboratories. And let's see who's doing it the best. What are the tactics that they're using? And then let's use that everywhere. That seems to make a lot more sense.
Like you said, let's learn from others. I love it. It makes sense when it comes from one party versus the other, and it makes sense state by state also. So we need to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with much more here in a moment with Dr. Ben Carson I'm David Scranton on the Income Generation, and Dr. Carson and I will be right back. Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and I'm so pleased to be here with our special guest today, Dr. Ben Carson, former Secretary of the Housing and Urban Development. So, Dr. Carson, let's pivot now. We talked about the virus itself. Let's pivot to the topic of the day on our show, which, as you know, is the real estate market. Real estate was looking like it might have some struggles. We spoke back in May because we had just come out of that first level of shutdown when we shut down the economy intentionally. But now real estate is booming. Good thing, bad thing? Are we in a bubble? Are we not in a bubble? What's your best guess there?
Well, right now the interest rates are still very low, so that's conducive to a booming market. But also there have been some real dynamic changes in where people want to live, because something has happened that probably will alter our society forever, and that is, remote work. And if you only have to come into the office once a week or once every other week, it now makes sense to move out and to move 20 or 30 or even 50 miles away. It's not a problem. And therefore, we see a lot of new homes being constructed, in the exurbs and in the rural areas. And people are obviously wanting to be free. They want to be able to walk around maskless and not be infecting anybody. So that is probably going to continue to encourage a strong housing market for some time to come.
Now, as the former head of the Housing Urban Development, you are really an advocate for folks who, may have a tough time, buying a property or living the American dream, so to speak. So the goal was to make sure that, they had a path toward that. Now we're worried about inflation, perhaps, with all the printing of money that's been going on, and that seems to like it's just going to be accelerating under the new administration, as well as these real estate prices going up. That kind of sort of makes it harder for a lot of folks to live that American dream, does it not?
No question, that makes it more difficult. And what we have to recognize about housing is that it is the principal mechanism for wealth accumulation in this country. The average homeowner has a net worth of $200,000. The average renter a net worth of $5,000. So it makes all the difference in the world. And we need to concentrate on removing the barriers, the obstacles, the disincentives. And there's a lot.
How do we do that, though? How do we remove those barriers?
Well, it's going to require the politicians to help remove some of the barriers and to change some of the policies. For instance, if you're getting housing subsidies and you make more money, you have to report that immediately so your rent can go up. Or if somebody else moves into the housing who has an income, you have to report that so that your rent goes up. This discourages families, family formation. Those kinds of things have a huge impact on whether an individual subsequently gets into that pool of people who's eligible to actually buy a home. So we have a lot of barriers at the beginning that keep people from ever even considering becoming a homeowner. And those are the kinds of things that really have a very negative impact on the income gap.
Sure. It's interesting because right now in the early days of the Biden administration with some of the executive orders, some of the things that I see the new president moving toward is something that to me is somewhat akin to affirmative action. And I know from speaking with most of my African American friends that a lot of them really aren't big fans of affirmative action. Your thoughts on the direction in which we seem to be heading over the last couple of weeks?
Well, it's a little concerning because what we are tending to do as a society recently is define everything in racial terms and in identity group terms, rather than out of many, one. We're saying out of one, many. We're just dividing everybody up and creating exactly the opposite situation that Dr. Martin Luther King dreamed about. And they seem to be celebrating that. We don't really want to go there. We want to really start thinking about what are the things that create equality and fairness for everyone. I wrote an op-ed some years ago about compassionate action instead of affirmative action, which means, of course, we as Americans have always had compassion for the disenfranchised people. I think we should continue to do that, but that should have nothing to do with one's exterior characteristics. That should have to do with one's circumstances.
Very well said. I love it. All right. So Dr. Carson, it's great having you here. Thanks so much for being part of our show. We really appreciate it. We hope to have you back.
A pleasure. Thank you so much.